The rain tapped gently against the windows of the coffee shop as three people huddled around a small table in the corner. Steam rose from their cups, but none of them seemed interested in drinking. Instead, their eyes were fixed on a tablet showing aerial views of a massive property tucked away in the hills of California. "This is it," whispered Ray, a tall man with a thin scar above his right eyebrow. He zoomed in on the image, revealing a sprawling mansion with multiple buildings, a large swimming pool, and what looked like a private testing track. "This is our ticket to the big time." Zoe, a woman with sharp eyes and quick hands, frowned as she studied the layout. "Elon Musk's place? Are you out of your mind?" Despite her words, there was a hint of excitement in her voice. After years of hitting jewelry stores and rich people's vacation homes, this would be their biggest job yet. The third person at the table, a stocky man everyone called Duke, took a sip of his coffee and nodded slowly. "Word on the street is he's heading to Singapore next week, some big tech conference where he's giving the main speech. The place will be empty except for maybe a housekeeper or two." "What about security?" Zoe asked, always the practical one. Of the group, Ray swiped to another image showing a security gate with a guard booth. "Standard stuff from what our source says. Guards patrol the grounds, but they follow patterns. Cameras, motion sensors, the usual rich person setup." Duke chuckled. "The guy builds rockets and electric cars. You'd think he'd have laser beams and robot guards or something." "That's just in the movies," Ray said, though there was a flash of doubt in his eyes. "Besides, we're not amateurs. We've been planning jobs like this for years." The three of them had met in community college 6 years ago. Back then, Ray was studying electrical engineering before dropping out when money got tight. Zoe had been the best in her computer science class until family problems forced her to quit. Duke had bounced between majors, never finding his place in the academic world, but discovering he had a talent for detailed planning. They'd started small, breaking into vacation homes during off-seasons, then moving up to jewelry stores and eventually targeting the mansions of local celebrities when they knew they were away. But this was different. This was Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world. "We need to do this right," Zoe said, pulling out her own laptop. "I've been looking into what's publicly known about his security systems. Most of it is custom-built, which makes sense given who he is." "Can you hack it?" Duke asked. Zoe gave him a look. "Maybe. Parts of it, at least. But we'll need to be inside to access some of the systems. I can't do everything remotely." For the next 3 weeks, they worked on nothing else. Ray used his connections to get jobs for a landscaping company that serviced properties in the same area, allowing him to observe the comings and goings around Musk's estate without raising suspicion. Zoe dug deep into any technical information she could find about the security systems Musk might use, even purchasing similar components online to practice bypassing them. Duke mapped out every possible entry and exit point, planning their movements, down to the second. They rented a small house about 20 miles away from the target, converting the garage into their planning center. The walls were covered with maps, schedules, and photographs. A table in the middle held various pieces of equipment: signal jammers, glass cutters, specialized tools for bypassing security systems, and 3 sets of communications gear. "The main challenge is the time factor," Duke explained one evening as they reviewed their plan for the 100th time. "We get in, we grab what we can, we get out. 30 minutes max." "What exactly are we looking for?" Zoe asked, a question they'd discussed before but kept circling back to. Ray pointed to a floor plan they'd pieced together from various sources. "His office will have prototypes, maybe unreleased tech. The master bedroom will have watches, jewelry. But the real prize?" He tapped a room labeled lab. "Whatever he's working on, that isn't public yet. Prototypes, plans, anything we can sell to competitors or collectors." The night before the planned break-in, they gathered for one final review. The atmosphere was tense, a mixture of excitement and fear that came before every job, but magnified, now by the scale of what they were attempting. "Our source confirms he left for Singapore this morning," Duke said, checking his phone. "The housekeeper left at 5, and there's no one scheduled to come to the property until tomorrow afternoon." Zoe nodded, her fingers moving swiftly over her keyboard. I've been monitoring the security company's communications. Standard patrol tonight, no changes to the routine. Ray zipped up his black backpack filled with tools. Then we're a go. Remember, if anything feels off, we abort. No hesitation, no debate. We're not risking our necks if something doesn't look right. The others nodded in agreement, though each of them knew they were unlikely to walk away from an opportunity like this, even if the risk increased. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the challenge, about proving they could pull off something this big. As night fell, they loaded their gear into a nondescript van with fake company logos on the sides. Ray drove, taking a winding route to avoid main roads with traffic cameras. Duke sat in the passenger seat, going through a checklist in his head, his foot tapping nervously against the floor. In the back, Zoe made final adjustments to her equipment, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop screen. They parked half a mile from the property, in a spot Ray had scouted that was hidden from the road by trees. From there they continued on foot, moving silently through the wooded area that bordered the back of Musk's estate. The mansion came into view as they crested a small hill. Despite having seen photos and videos, the reality of it was still impressive. A modern fortress of glass and concrete, sprawling across the landscape like something from a science fiction movie. Cameras at the perimeter, Zoe whispered, pointing to small devices mounted on trees and fence posts. She pulled out a tablet and tapped a few commands. Looping the feed, now. They waited for her signal, then moved quickly to the fence. It was tall, but not impossible to climb, especially with the equipment they'd brought. Duke went first, attaching a device to the top that would prevent any alarm from triggering when they crossed. Zoe followed, then Ray, each of them moving, with the practiced efficiency that came from years of similar jobs. Once inside the perimeter, they stayed low, using the landscaping for cover as they approached the main house. A security guard walked by, his flashlight sweeping across the lawn, but he passed without noticing them crouched behind a row of sculpted bushes. Patrol times match our intel, Duke whispered. We have 7 minutes until he comes back this way. They moved to a side entrance, a glass door that led to what they believed was a home gym. Zoe examined the electronic lock, her brow furrowed in concentration. This is different, she said, her voice barely audible. It's not the standard system I was expecting. Ray shifted uneasily. Can you bypass it? Zoe didn't answer immediately, instead pulling tools from her bag and connecting a small device to the keypad. After what seemed like an eternity, there was a soft click, and the door unlocked. We're in, she said, a hint of relief in her voice. But that was too complicated. For a gym door, something feels off. They hesitated, remembering their agreement to abort if anything seemed wrong. But then Duke checked his watch and nodded toward the door. 5 minutes until the guard comes back. It's now or never. Ray pushed the door open, and they slipped inside. The gym was dark, but their flashlights revealed state-of-the-art equipment, a swimming pool at the far end, and what looked like a climbing wall. They moved quickly through the space, finding another door that, according to their plans, should lead to the main house. This lock was simpler, and Zoe bypassed it in seconds. As the door opened, they braced themselves, half expecting alarms to blare or lights to flash on. But the house remained quiet and dark. Too easy, Zoe murmured, but they pressed on. They found themselves in a hallway lined with framed patents and photographs of rockets and electric cars. Moonlight streamed through massive windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Despite the tension, they couldn't help but pause for a moment, taking in the surroundings. Focus, Ray whispered. Duke, you take the main floor, look for the office. Zoe, find the security room and make sure we stay invisible. I'll head upstairs to the master bedroom and the lab. They split up, each with a clear mission and a mental countdown running in their heads. 25 minutes left before they needed to be on their way out. As Ray climbed the sweeping staircase to the second floor, a strange feeling crept over him. The house was too quiet, too still. For someone as rich and as much of a target as Elon Musk, the security seemed almost normal. No armed guards, no advanced systems they couldn't handle, just the standard measures they'd encountered dozens of times before. He reached the top of the stairs and paused, listening. Nothing but the faint hum of what might be air conditioning or servers running somewhere in the building. Following the memorized floor plan, he turned left, heading toward what they believed was the lab. The door at the end of the hallway was different from the others, heavier, with a more sophisticated lock. Ray smiled to himself. This had to be it. This had to be where Musk kept his most valuable secrets. As he approached, he noticed something unusual, a small blue light on the wall next to the door, pulsing gently. It wasn't on any of their plans or in any of the information they'd gathered. Ray hesitated, then reached for his communication device to ask Zoe about it. Before he could press the button, the blue light suddenly glowed brighter, and a soft, almost imperceptible hum filled the air. Ray froze, his instincts screaming that something was very, very wrong. And in that moment, as the blue light bathed his face, he realized their mistake. They hadn't underestimated the security. They had misunderstood it completely. This wasn't just a rich man's house with expensive locks and cameras. This was the home of someone who built spaceships and self-driving cars, someone who had access to technology that wasn't available to the public yet. And they had just walked right into it. Ray backed away from the blue light, his heart pounding against his ribs. The humming sound grew slightly louder, and he could have sworn the light was following his movements, like an eye tracking its prey. "Guys," he whispered into his communication device, "something's not right up here." Zoe's voice came back, tense and quick. "I'm in what looks like a security room, but this isn't normal. There are screens showing heat signatures throughout the house. They know exactly where we are." "We need to abort," Duke cut in, his usual calm replaced by urgency. "I found the office, but there's some kind of glass case that dropped around the desk when I entered. I can't get through it." Ray turned to head back downstairs but froze when he heard a soft mechanical whirring from around the corner. He pressed himself against the wall and peered cautiously around the edge. What he saw made his blood run cold. A sleek, dog-like robot was padding silently down the hallway, its movements unnervingly natural. It had no head, just sensors mounted on a flexible neck, and it moved with the precision of a predator. Ray had seen videos of Boston Dynamics robots online, but this was different, more advanced, more purposeful. And it was coming straight toward him. He ducked back and looked frantically for an escape route. The staircase was too far. He'd never make it before the robot spotted him. A door stood ajar a few feet away, and Ray lunged for it, slipping inside just as the mechanical dog rounded the corner. He found himself in what appeared to be a bedroom, though not the master suite they had identified in their plans. This room was simpler, possibly a guest room. Ray locked the door behind him, knowing it would only buy him seconds if the robot decided to come after him. "I've got some kind of robot dog patrolling up here," he whispered into his comm. "We need to get out now." "Working on it," Zoe replied, her voice tight with concentration. "The security system is like nothing I've seen before. It's adaptive, learning from our movements. But I think I found an override for the door locks." Down on the main floor, Duke was having his own problems. The glass case around the desk seemed to be some kind of security measure triggered by his entry. Worse, the exits from the office had sealed shut, leaving him effectively trapped. "I can't get out of the office," he reported. "The doors won't budge." "Hang tight," Zoe responded. "I'm trying to... Wait, what's that sound?" A high-pitched tone began to emanate from the walls, not loud but impossible to ignore, like an electronic mosquito buzzing directly in their ears. In the security room, Zoe winced and covered her ears, but it didn't help. The sound seemed to bypass her ears entirely, vibrating directly against her skull. "Some kind of sonic deterrent," she muttered, forcing herself to focus on the control panel in front of her. The system was unlike anything she'd encountered, with interfaces that seemed to anticipate her hacking attempts. Every time she thought she'd found a way in, the system would adapt, closing the vulnerability before she could exploit it. On one of the screens, she could see Duke in the office, pounding on the glass case in frustration. Another showed Ray in the guest bedroom, pressing his ear against the door, presumably listening for the robot dog. And a third screen showed herself, from behind, exactly as she was standing now. Zoe spun around, expecting to find a camera, but instead found herself face to face with a humanoid robot. It wasn't particularly human-like, more of a metal frame with basic limbs and a featureless head, but it stood there perfectly still, observing her. She backed away slowly, her mind racing. This had to be one of the Tesla bot prototypes that Musk had been developing. She'd read about them but didn't think they were operational yet. "Guys," she whispered into her comm. "There's a robot in here with me. One of those Tesla bots." "Is it doing anything?" Ray asked. "Just watching me." As she spoke, the robot tilted its head slightly, as if curious. "I think it's learning, analyzing what I'm doing." In the guest bedroom, Ray was growing increasingly desperate. The robot dog had stopped outside the door. He could hear it scratching, gently, not trying to break in, just letting him know it was there, waiting. He scanned the room for another exit or a potential weapon. The windows were an option, but they were at least 20 feet above the ground, and he hadn't brought equipment for that kind of descent. Under normal circumstances, he might risk the jump, but with unknown security measures outside, it seemed too dangerous. His eyes fell on a closet door. Maybe there was something useful inside, a tool or even access to another room. He crossed quickly and pulled it open. Inside was not a closet, but a small elevator. "Guys, I found something," he whispered. "Some kind of private elevator in the guest room. Don't use it," Zoe warned immediately. "It could take you anywhere. Could be a trap," but the scratching at the door was getting more insistent, and Ray could see the handle turning slowly. The robot dog had figured out how to open the door. "I don't have a choice," he said, stepping into the elevator. There were only 2 buttons, inside, up and down. He pressed down, hoping it would take him to the main floor where he could regroup with the others. The doors closed silently just as the bedroom door began to open. The elevator descended smoothly, without the usual sensation of movement. For a moment, Ray felt relief wash over him. Then the lights in the elevator went out, plunging him into total darkness. A small screen lit up on the wall, displaying a simple message. "Unauthorized user detected. Security protocol initiated." Before Ray could react, a fine mist began spraying from vents in the ceiling. He held his breath and pounded on the doors, but they remained firmly shut. The mist wasn't toxic, he could tell that much, but it had an odd, sweet smell that made his head swim even from the little he'd inadvertently inhaled. Down in the office, Duke had given up on breaking the glass case and was instead searching, desperately, for another way out. The high-pitched tone was making it hard to think, and the sealed doors weren't budging no matter how hard he pushed. Then, abruptly, the tone stopped. The sudden silence was almost as disorienting as the noise had been. A moment later, a voice spoke from hidden speakers. Not a human voice, but not quite a typical AI assistant either. It had an unsettling quality that made it sound almost alive. "Security breach detected. 3 intruders identified. Non-lethal containment measures deployed. Law enforcement has been notified." Duke's shoulders slumped. If the police were on their way, they were done for. But maybe there was still time to escape if they could just get out of these traps. "Zoe," he called over the comm. "Tell me you've got something." In the security room, Zoe was still facing off with the Tesla bot. It hadn't made any aggressive moves, but it also hadn't let her near the exit. Every time she tried to step around it, it would shift position to block her path. "I'm working on it," she replied, her fingers flying over her tablet as she tried to find a backdoor into the system. "But this security setup it's like it's thinking, adapting in real time." She glanced up at the robot, which was still watching her with its featureless face. "I think it's all connected. The house, the robots, everything. It's one integrated system." As if confirming her theory, the robot suddenly spoke, using the same voice they'd heard over the speakers. "Correct. This residence is protected by a neural network security system. All subsystems are coordinated through a central AI." Zoe stared, at the robot, momentarily forgetting the danger they were in. That's years ahead of current commercial technology. Elon Musk often implements prototype systems in his personal residences before public release, the robot replied. Then, with what almost sounded like pride, it added, I am currently operating at 47% of designed capacity. That gave Zoe an idea. If the system wasn't running at full capacity, maybe there were vulnerabilities she could exploit. She began typing furiously on her tablet, searching for weaknesses in the network. Meanwhile, Ray was struggling to stay conscious in the elevator. The sweet-smelling mist had filled the small space, and despite his best efforts to hold his breath, he'd been forced to inhale some of it. His limbs felt heavy, and his thoughts were becoming sluggish. The screen on the wall updated its message. Sedative administered. Please remain calm. Medical personnel will attend to you shortly. Ray slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. He tried to call out to his teammates over the comm, but his tongue felt too thick to form words properly. The last thing he saw before his eyes closed was the elevator doors finally opening, revealing not the main floor of the mansion, but what looked like a secure holding area. Back in the office, Duke had given up on escape and was now frantically trying to cover their tracks. If they were going to be caught, he could at least try to minimize the evidence against them. He pulled out his phone and began deleting messages, files, anything that might connect them to previous jobs or other criminals. The voice spoke again, from the speakers. Attempting to destroy evidence is a separate offense. All electronic activities within this residence are being recorded. Duke threw his phone down in frustration. Zoe, please tell me you've got something. In the security room, Zoe had made progress. She'd identified what she thought was a backdoor into the system. Not enough to shut it down completely, but possibly enough to override the door locks and give them a chance to escape. I think I can get the doors open, she said, her voice tense with concentration. But these robots might still be a problem. The Tesla bot watching her tilted its head again. Your attempts to compromise this system have been educational. Security protocols are being updated in real time based on your methodologies. Zoe couldn't help but feel a grudging admiration for whoever had designed this system. It was learning, from her hacking attempts, patching its own vulnerabilities as she discovered them. In any other circumstance, she would have been fascinated, maybe even impressed. Now it was just terrifying. Outside, they could hear the faint sound of sirens approaching. Time was running out. With a final flourish of coding, Zoe executed her override command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, to her relief, the door to the security room slid open. I did it, she exclaimed. Duke, the office doors should be open now. We need to find Ray and get out of here. But as she tried to step toward the exit, the Tesla bot moved with surprising speed, positioning itself in the doorway. It didn't make any threatening gestures. It simply stood there, an immovable obstacle. I apologize, it said, but I cannot allow you to leave. Please wait for law enforcement to arrive. The sirens were getting louder now. In the office, Duke found that the doors had indeed unlocked, but as soon as he stepped into the hallway, he came face to face with two more robot dogs, their sensor arrays fixed directly on him. As the realization sank in that there was no escape, Duke couldn't help but laugh at the irony of their situation. They had come to steal technology from Elon Musk, only to be caught by the very technology they had hoped to profit from. Outside, police cars pulled up to the mansion gates, their lights painting the night in flashes of red and blue. The first, officers approached cautiously, not yet knowing what awaited them inside the tech billionaire's home. What they would find were three thieves who had learned the hard way that breaking into Elon Musk's mansion was a mistake they would instantly regret. The flashing lights of police cars lit up the driveway as officers surrounded the mansion. Inside, the three thieves remained trapped by Musk's security system, each in their own unique predicament. In the holding area where the elevator had deposited him, Ray was slowly regaining consciousness. The sedative mist had worn off enough for him to sit up and take in his surroundings. The room was small and stark, with white walls and bright lighting. There was no visible door. The elevator he'd arrived in had closed and appeared to be part of the seamless wall now. Hello? he called out, his voice still thick from the sedative. "Zoe? Duke? Can anyone hear me?" There was no response from his teammates, but a panel in the wall slid open, revealing a screen. The same calm voice he'd heard in the elevator spoke again. "Your companions are currently contained in separate areas of the residence. Law enforcement officers are entering the premises now. Please remain seated." Ray slumped back against the wall. They were done for. Years of careful planning and successful jobs, only to be caught in a high-tech trap they never saw coming. He thought about his mother, who would be devastated when she found out. She'd always believed he was working in IT security, testing systems for weaknesses. In a way, he supposed that wasn't entirely a lie. On the main floor, Duke was sitting cross-legged in the hallway, the two robot dogs keeping watch on either side of him. He'd briefly considered making a run for it, but the way those machines moved, fluid and quick, convinced him they'd be on him before he got 10 feet. "So," he said to the nearest robot dog, "you guys run on batteries or what? How long can you operate before you need to recharge?" The dog didn't respond, but its sensor array swiveled slightly, focusing more intently on him. Duke sighed. "Worth a try." He heard footsteps approaching, human ones this time, and looked up to see two police officers cautiously making their way down the hallway, guns drawn. They stopped short when they spotted him sitting there with the robot guards. "Hands where we can see them," one officer called out. Duke slowly raised his hands. "Already ahead of you, officer. Not looking to make things worse." The officers approached, carefully, eyeing the robot dogs with obvious unease. One of the machines turned its sensors toward them, then stepped back, giving them room to take Duke into custody. "Those things safe?" the second officer asked as she handcuffed Duke. "Seem to be," Duke replied. "They had plenty of chances to hurt me if they wanted to. I think they're just designed to contain, not harm." The officer nodded, looking somewhat relieved. "Where are your accomplices?" Duke shrugged as best he could with his hands cuffed behind his back. "We got separated, last I heard. One was in a security room and the other found an elevator somewhere upstairs." In the security room, Zoe was still in a standoff with the Tesla bot. It hadn't moved from the doorway and she'd given up trying to find a way past. Instead, she'd turned her attention back to the security system, not to escape but out of pure professional curiosity. "So you're actually learning from my hacking attempts?" she asked the robot. "Updating your security protocols in real time?" The Tesla bot's featureless head tilted slightly. "Correct. This system is designed to evolve based on the threats it encounters. Your methods have been cataloged and will be used to enhance future security measures." Despite her situation, Zoe couldn't help but be impressed. That's actually brilliant. Most systems have fixed protocols. They might get updated with patches, but they don't learn on the fly like this. "Thank you for the assessment," the robot replied. And Zoe could have sworn she detected a hint of pride in its synthesized voice. The sound of approaching footsteps caught her attention, and she turned to see two more police officers entering the security room, guided by another Tesla bot. Like their colleagues who had found Duke, they looked warily at the robots. "Ma'am, please step away from the computer equipment and put your hands up," one officer commanded. Zoe complied, setting down her tablet and raising her hands. As the officers moved to handcuff her, she couldn't help but ask, "Have you found my friends? Are they okay?" "We have one in custody," the officer replied. "They're searching for the third now." While Duke and Zoe were being led out of the mansion, in handcuffs, Ray was still trapped in the holding room with no visible exit. The screen on the wall had gone dark and he was beginning to wonder if they'd simply forgotten about him. Then, without warning, one wall of the room seemed to split down the middle, revealing a hidden door. Through it walked a man in a police uniform, accompanied by what looked like a more advanced version of the robot dogs, this one with an actual head and more defined features. "Mr. Sullivan," the officer said, reading from a tablet. "Raymond Sullivan. You want to tell me what you're doing in Mr. Musk's private residence?" Ray considered lying but quickly thought better of it. They'd been caught red-handed, and making up stories would only make things worse. "It was supposed to be a simple job," he admitted. "Get in, grab some valuables, get out. We didn't expect all this." He gestured vaguely at the robot and the hidden door. The officer nodded as if he'd heard it all before. Mr. Musk's security team has already provided us with extensive footage of your break-in, along with what appears to be your entire planning process. The system has been monitoring you for weeks ever since you started scoping out the property. Ray felt the blood drain from his face. Weeks? But how did they— I don't have those details, the officer cut him off. I'm just here to take you in. Stand up slowly and turn around so I can cuff you. As Ray was being led through the mansion toward the exit, he got his first glimpse of the true extent of the security system they'd triggered. Panels in the walls had opened to reveal more robots in various states of readiness. Cameras tracked their movement from every angle. Even the artwork on the wall seemed to be watching them, and Ray suspected some of the frames contained hidden sensors or possibly weapons. Outside, a small crowd of neighbors and late-night passers-by had gathered at the edge of the property, held back by police tape. News vans were starting to arrive, their satellite dishes extending upward like curious periscopes. This was going to be a big story, the attempted robbery of Elon Musk's mansion thwarted by his own cutting-edge security technology. The three thieves were placed in separate police cars. As Ray was being guided into the back seat, he caught a glimpse of Zoe being led to another car. She met his eyes briefly, and he could read the mix of emotions on her face: regret, fear, but also something else. A kind of amazed disbelief at what they'd encountered inside the mansion. As the police cars pulled away from the property, Ray leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes. The night had gone about as badly as it possibly could have. They were headed to jail, facing serious charges, and had nothing to show for it except first-hand knowledge of security technology that wouldn't be available to the public for years, if ever. What he didn't know yet was that their troubles were just beginning. At the police station, the three thieves were processed separately. Fingerprints taken, mugshots snapped, personal belongings cataloged and sealed in plastic bags. They were placed in holding cells to await their initial court appearance the next morning. It was close to dawn when a detective finally came to interview Ray. The man looked tired but interested, like Ray was a puzzle he was genuinely curious to solve. "So," the detective said, sitting down across from Ray in the small interview room, "want to tell me what possessed you to break into one of the most secure private residences in the country?" Ray sighed. It was supposed to be a straightforward job. In and out in 30 minutes. We'd done our homework, at least we thought we had. "You had no idea about the security system?" "We knew there would be security, obviously. Cameras, motion sensors, maybe guards. But the robots? The AI? That elevator trap? No, we had no clue." The detective nodded, making notes on his pad. "And whose idea was it originally? Who picked the target?" Ray hesitated. There was honor among thieves, or so they said. But after what they'd just been through, he wasn't feeling particularly honorable. "It was a group decision. We all agreed it would be the score of a lifetime." The detective murmured, clearly not believing him. "Well, here's something you might find interesting. About 20 minutes ago, we received a call from Mr. Musk's personal attorney." Ray sat up straighter. "His attorney? Why would— Apparently, Mr. Musk is very interested in talking to the three of you. Not to press additional charges, surprisingly, but to discuss what he called an opportunity." "An opportunity?" Ray repeated, confused. "What kind of opportunity?" The detective shrugged. "He didn't share the details with me, but his lawyer mentioned something about being impressed by your team's methods despite the obvious failure of the execution." Ray sat back, trying to process this unexpected turn. Elon Musk wanted to talk to them? The man whose house they had just tried to rob? It didn't make sense. Unless— A thought struck him, so absurd he almost laughed out loud. What if this had all been some kind of test? What if Musk had known about their plans from the beginning and had allowed them to proceed just to see how far they'd get against his security system? No, that was ridiculous. Even for someone as eccentric as Musk, that would be taking things too far. More likely he just wanted to see their faces, maybe gloat a bit before making sure they were locked away for a good long time. "When is this meeting supposed to happen?" Ray asked. "That's the other interesting part," the detective said, checking his watch. "His lawyer is on his way here now, should arrive within the hour." As the detective left, Ray was led back to his holding cell to wait. Through the bars, he could see Duke in a cell across the way, looking tired but strangely calm. There was no sign of Zoe. What did Elon Musk want with them? And what kind of opportunity could possibly come from the disaster of a night they'd just experienced? Ray sat on the hard bench, his mind racing with possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Whatever was coming next, he had a feeling it would be just as unexpected as the security system they'd encountered in the mansion. For better or worse, their lives had taken a turn into the unknown. Ray paced his small holding cell, too wired to sit still despite his exhaustion. Every few minutes he glanced at the clock on the wall outside the cells. Nearly an hour had passed since the detective told him about Musk's lawyer coming to see them. Across the way, Duke had fallen asleep on his bench, somehow able to rest despite their situation. There was still no sign of Zoe, and Ray was starting to worry. Had she been taken somewhere else? Was she already being processed into the main jail? The sound of a door opening at the end of the corridor caught his attention. The detective who had interviewed him earlier appeared, accompanied by a woman in an impeccable business suit. She carried a sleek leather briefcase and walked with the confident air of someone who charged more per hour than most people made in a week. "Mr. Sullivan," the detective said, stopping in front of Ray's cell. "This is Ms. Chen, Mr. Musk's attorney." The woman nodded curtly. "We need to speak privately. Is there an interview room available?" "Of course," the detective replied, unlocking Ray's cell. "This way." As Ray was led out, he noticed Duke stirring in his cell. "What about my partners?" he asked. "They'll be brought in shortly," Ms. Chen assured him. Mr. Musk was very clear that he wanted to speak with all three of you. The interview room was small but comfortable, with a table and several chairs. Ray was told to sit on one side while Ms. Chen set her briefcase on the table and took a seat opposite him. The detective left, closing the door behind him. "Before we begin," Ms. Chen said, opening her briefcase and removing a tablet, "I need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded, and Mr. Musk will be joining us virtually. Is that acceptable to you?" Ray shrugged. "Do I have a choice?" "You always have choices, Mr. Sullivan. That's partly why we're here today." Before Ray could ask what she meant, the tablet lit up and she placed it on a stand facing him. After a moment, Elon Musk's face appeared on the screen. He appeared to be in what looked like a hotel room wearing a simple black t-shirt. "Mr. Sullivan," Musk said, his expression neutral, "I understand you and your friends had an interesting experience at my home last night." Ray wasn't sure how to respond. Was this some kind of joke? "You could say that," he finally managed. "Your companion, Ms. Garcia, I believe, showed particular interest in my security system. She even made some impressive attempts to bypass it." The door opened and Zoe was led in by another officer. She looked tired but alert, her eyes widening when she saw Musk's face on the tablet. "Ah, there she is now," Musk said. "Please have a seat, Ms. Garcia." Zoe sat beside Ray, shooting him a confused look. A moment later, Duke was brought in as well, completing their trio. Once they were all seated, Musk continued, "I'll get right to the point. The three of you attempted to rob my home. Under normal circumstances, I would simply let the legal system run its course. However, I find myself in a unique position to offer you an alternative." The thieves exchanged glances. This was not at all what they had expected. "What kind of alternative?" Duke asked cautiously. Musk leaned forward slightly on the screen. "You see, the security system that caught you is a prototype, an AI-driven network that I've been developing for some time. It's designed to learn from the threats it encounters, adapting and improving its defenses. Last night was its first real-world test against determined human opponents." "Wait," Zoe interrupted, her professional curiosity overriding her common sense. "You're saying we were some kind of test subjects?" "Not intentionally," Musk clarified. "But once my system alerted me to your planning activities, yes, it had been monitoring you for weeks, I decided to allow the attempt to proceed under controlled conditions. I wanted to see how the system would perform against real intruders with actual skills, not just paid testers who don't have the same motivation." Ray felt a mix of anger and disbelief. So you let us break in, knowing we'd be caught, just to test your fancy security system? I had safeguards in place, Musk said dismissively. You were never in any real danger, and neither was anything of significant value in the house. Most of my truly important items and prototypes are kept elsewhere. Ms. Chen cleared her throat. Perhaps we should move on to the offer, Mr. Musk. Right, Musk nodded. Here's my proposal. Instead of pressing charges and seeing you all sent to prison for what would likely be a significant number of years, I'm offering you jobs. There was a moment of stunned silence before all three thieves started speaking. At once. Jobs? Duke exclaimed. What kind of jobs? Zoe asked. Is this a joke? Ray demanded. Musk held up a hand and they fell silent. Not a joke. I'm serious. My security team could use people with your particular skill sets. Mr. Thompson, he nodded at Duke. Your planning abilities and attention to detail are impressive. Ms. Garcia, your hacking skills managed to briefly confuse a system that cost millions to develop. And Mr. Sullivan, your adaptive thinking under pressure is exactly the kind of trait I look for in employees. You want to hire us to do what, exactly? Ray asked, still skeptical. To try to break into my properties, my systems, my prototypes, and then tell me how to make them more secure, Musk explained. Essentially, you'd be professional thieves working for me instead of against me. Zoe leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. Like penetration testers? Red team operations? Precisely, Musk nodded, but with a broader scope. Not just digital systems, but physical security as well. You'd be well compensated, of course, and any criminal charges related to last night's activities would be dropped. The three thieves looked at each other, communicating silently in the way that only people who have worked closely together for years can do. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. What's the catch? Duke asked finally. Ms. Chen spoke up. The catch, as you put it, is that you would be required to sign extremely binding non-disclosure agreements. You would need to cut ties with any criminal contacts, and you would be subject to regular monitoring for at least the first year of employment. Also, Musk added, if you ever betray my trust or use what you learn while working for me for criminal purposes, I will ensure that you face the maximum possible consequences, both legal and financial. How do we know this isn't just some elaborate setup? Ray asked. Get us to admit to other crimes or implicate other people. You don't, Musk said simply. But consider your alternatives. Right now, the evidence against you is overwhelming. You were caught inside my home with burglary tools and detailed plans. Your prior activities, which yes, my security system has been logging, would likely come to light during a thorough investigation. You're looking at years in prison, at minimum. He let that sink in before continuing. Or you can take a chance on this offer and potentially turn your lives around. Use your skills for something constructive instead of destructive. The choice is yours. The three thieves sat in silence for a long moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Ray thought about his mother, how disappointed she would be to learn the truth about his IT security job. Duke thought about the years they'd spent building their reputation in certain circles, and how quickly it had all fallen apart in one night. Zoe thought about the technology she'd seen in Musk's mansion, technology she might actually get to work with if they accepted this offer. Can we have some time to think about it? Ray asked finally. You have until this evening, Ms. Chen replied. Mr. Musk is returning from Singapore tomorrow, and he needs your decision before then. What about our stuff? Duke asked. Our homes, our belongings? If you accept the offer, arrangements will be made, Ms. Chen assured him. You would essentially be starting new lives, with new identities if necessary. And if we say no? Zoe asked. Musk's expression remained neutral. Then the legal process continues as normal. I don't make this offer out of charity, Ms. Garcia. I make it because I see potential value in what you three could bring to my security operations. But if you decline, I'll simply find other talented individuals who made better life choices. With that, he nodded to Ms. Chen. I have another meeting to attend. Let me know their decision. The screen went dark. Ms. Chen packed up the tablet and stood. The officers will take you back to your cells for now. You'll be brought back here at 6 p.m. for your decision. I suggest you use the time wisely to consider Mr. Musk's offer." As they were led back to their cells, now all placed next to each other so they could talk, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They had gone from planning the heist of a lifetime to potentially working for one of the richest men in the world in the span of less than 24 hours. "What do you guys think?" Duke asked once the officers had left them alone. Zoe sat on her bench, elbows on her knees. "It sounds amazing, honestly. Working with that kind of technology, getting paid, legally for the skills we've been using to break the law, it's like a dream job." "If it's real," Ray cautioned, "this could still be some kind of trap." "I don't think so," Duke said thoughtfully. "It makes a weird kind of sense. Musk is known for unusual hiring practices, and who better to test security than people who actually know how to break it?" Ray paced his cell, torn between suspicion and hope. "Even if it is legit, we'd be giving up everything, our identities, our freedom in some ways. We'd be under his thumb." "As opposed to being in prison," Zoe pointed out. "At least this way we'd be using our skills, making good money, and not wearing jumpsuits every day." They debated back and forth for hours, weighing the pros and cons, trying to spot any hidden angles they might have missed. By late afternoon, they had largely talked themselves in circles and were no closer to a unanimous decision. "It comes down to this," Duke said finally. "Do we trust Elon Musk more than we trust the criminal justice system? Because those are our options right now." Ray stopped pacing and leaned against the bars of his cell. "When you put it that way, we take the deal," Zoe said firmly. "We'd be idiots not to." Ray looked at her, then at Duke, who nodded in agreement. "All right," he sighed. "I guess we're going to work for Elon Musk." What none of them realized yet was that this decision would lead them into adventures far stranger and more dangerous than anything they had experienced in their lives as thieves. The security system they had encountered in Musk's mansion was just the beginning, a small taste of the cutting-edge, sometimes experimental technologies they would soon be tasked with testing, breaking, and ultimately improving. For better or worse, their lives would never be the same again. 6 months later, Ray stood on the rooftop of a sleek glass building in Austin, Texas, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Behind him, Duke was checking the straps on a harness while Zoe sat cross-legged with a laptop balanced on her knees, typing rapidly. "Security override complete," she announced. "We have a 12-minute window before the backup system kicks in." Ray nodded, slipping on a pair of gloves. "Let's make it count." In the half-year since their fateful encounter with Elon Musk's mansion security system, their lives had transformed completely. True to his word, Musk had dropped all charges against them in exchange for their services testing security at his various properties and businesses. They had new identities, new apartments in Austin near Tesla's headquarters, and salaries that made their previous criminal earnings look like pocket change. But most importantly, they had purpose, using their skills not to take, but to protect and improve. Tonight's mission was their most challenging yet: break into a new Tesla research facility that was developing the next generation of AI-driven security systems. The very same technology that had caught them in Musk's mansion was now being refined for commercial applications, and they were tasked with finding any weaknesses before it went to market. "Remember," Duke said as he handed Ray the harness, "we're looking for blind spots in the motion detection system. The engineers think they've eliminated them all, but Musk wants us to prove otherwise." Ray strapped himself in, checking each buckle twice. "And the robot dogs? They should be in standby mode during our window," Zoe replied, still focused on her screen. "But be ready just in case. The system is designed to adapt, so it might figure out what we're doing and wake them up." With a nod, Ray moved to the edge of the roof. Unlike their break-in at Musk's mansion, this time they had blueprints, security codes, and inside knowledge of the systems they were facing. But that didn't make it easy. Musk had instructed his engineers to add new, undocumented features specifically to challenge the ex-thieves. Dropping in 3, 2, 1, Ray counted down, then leapt off the edge of the building. The harness caught him after a short freefall, and he swung toward a large window on the floor below. Using a specialized tool, he cut a perfect circle in the glass and reached through to unlock the window from the inside. "I'm in," he whispered into his comm device. "No alarms triggered yet." "Nice work," Duke's voice came back. "I'm monitoring the security office feed. Guards are still on their coffee break." Ray slipped through the window into a darkened laboratory, filled with half-assembled prototypes and complex equipment. His target was on the far side, a server room containing the brain of the building's security system. He moved silently across the lab, years of experience making his footsteps nearly soundless on the polished floor. When he reached the server room door, he placed a small device Zoe had built onto the electronic lock. It lit up green almost immediately, and the door clicked open. "Phase 1 complete," he reported. Entering the server room now. As Ray began setting up the testing equipment they'd brought to probe the system's defenses, Duke was making his way through the building's main entrance, dressed in a convincing security uniform. Their testing protocols required multiple approaches: Ray's covert entry from above, Duke's social engineering attempt through the front, and Zoe's digital attack from outside. "Guard at the desk is buying my story," Duke murmured into his hidden mic. "Heading to the elevator now." Up on the roof, Zoe was deep in concentration, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she probed the digital defenses of the facility. Unlike their criminal days, she now had authorization tokens and partial access to the system. But the real test was seeing if she could go beyond those permissions and gain control of critical functions. "Interesting," she muttered. "They've implemented that patch we suggested last month, but left a backdoor in the camera system. Making note of that." For the next 20 minutes, the three worked in perfect coordination, each testing different aspects of the security system. Ray planted harmless payload devices throughout the server room that would report back data on how the system responded to various threats. Duke made it all the way to the research director's office without being questioned once, exposing a serious flaw in the human element of the security protocols. And Zoe managed to gain access to areas of the network that should have been off-limits, documenting each vulnerability as she found it. Just as Ray was about to exit through the same window he'd entered, a soft whirring sound from the hallway made him freeze. Guys?" he whispered. "I think we have company." Through the laboratory door, he could see the distinctive shape of a robot dog prowling the corridor, its sensors sweeping back and forth. "That's not supposed to happen," Zoe replied, concern evident in her voice. "The robots should all be in standby mode during our test window." "Well, someone forgot to tell this one," Ray said, ducking behind a workstation as the robot's sensors pointed in his direction. "It's definitely active and it's definitely looking for something." Duke's voice came through the comm. "The system might be learning again. Remember how it adapted to our movements in Musk's mansion? Maybe it's doing the same thing now, figuring out that it's being tested." "Great," Ray muttered. "Just what we need, an AI security system with a competitive streak." He watched as the robot dog paused outside the laboratory door, its head tilting slightly as if listening. Then, to Ray's alarm, it began to push the door open with its front paw. "It's coming in," he whispered. "Any suggestions?" "Don't move," Zoe advised. "I'm trying to access its control protocols, but they've been updated since the last test. Give me a minute." Ray stayed perfectly still as the robot entered the lab, its mechanical movements eerily silent on the tiled floor. It began, a methodical sweep of the room, checking each potential hiding spot with mechanical precision. "Zoe," Ray hissed, "it's getting closer." "Working on it," she replied, her voice tense with concentration. "The system is fighting back, countering each access attempt. It's almost like it's anticipating what I'm going to try next." The robot dog was less than 10 feet away now, its sensors pointed directly at the workstation where Ray was hiding. In seconds, it would have a clear line of sight to him. "Got it!" Zoe exclaimed suddenly. "Sending the shutdown command now." For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The robot continued its approach, now just feet away from discovering Ray. Then, just as its sensor array was about to peer around the workstation, The lights on its body flickered and went dark. The machine froze in place, powered down by Zoe's command. Ray let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was too close. Tell me about it, Zoe agreed. The system is definitely learning. It blocked 3 of my standard approaches before I found a vulnerability. We're going to need to document this carefully. After ensuring the robot dog wouldn't suddenly reactivate, Ray made his way back to the window and climbed out, using the harness to ascend to the roof where Zoe waited. Duke joined them 10 minutes later, having casually walked out the front door with a nod to the same guard who had let him in. So, Duke said as they packed up their equipment, another successful test? Depends on how you define success, Ray replied. We got in, planted the payloads, and got out. But that security system is getting smarter. If it keeps evolving at this rate, even we won't be able to break in soon. Zoe nodded, a hint of professional pride in her expression. Which is exactly the point. Musk is going to be pleased with the results, though maybe not with how close that robot came to catching you. Back at their shared office in the Tesla complex, they compiled their findings into a detailed report. This was the part Ray had initially struggled with the most. The transition from breaking in and taking things to breaking in and writing reports about it. But over the months he'd come to appreciate the purpose behind their work. Look at these adaptation patterns, Zoe said, pointing to a graph on her screen. The system is learning exponentially faster than the previous version. At this rate, it'll be virtually impenetrable within a few more iterations. Isn't that putting us out of a job? Duke asked with a wry smile. Ray shook his head. Musk already talked to me about that. As the system gets better, our role shifts. Instead of just testing physical security, we'll be consulting on implementing these systems for high-value clients, governments, research facilities, that sort of thing. From thieves to security consultants, Zoe mused. Who would have thought? As they finished their report, Ray couldn't help reflecting on how dramatically their lives had changed. 6 months ago, they had been planning to rob one of the richest men in the world. Now they were trusted employees, using their unique skills to create something beneficial. The next morning, they presented their findings directly to Musk in a small conference room. He listened attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions about specific vulnerabilities they'd discovered. So the system actually activated a robot to search for Ray, even though it wasn't programmed to do that during the test window, Musk asked, clearly intrigued rather than concerned. Yes, Zoe confirmed. It appears the AI recognized patterns in our behavior from previous tests and proactively deployed countermeasures. It's learning not just how to respond to threats, but how to anticipate them. Musk leaned back in his chair, a rare smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That's exactly what we want. A security system that can think ahead of the people trying to beat it. He turned to Ray. And your assessment of the overall security level? Ray considered for a moment. With the vulnerabilities we found patched, I'd say it's nearly impossible for anyone without inside knowledge to breach it. But no system is ever completely impenetrable. It's an ongoing process. Which is why I have you 3. Musk nodded. He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Good work. The team will implement your recommendations immediately. For your next assignment, I want you to think bigger. Bigger how? Duke asked. I'm launching a new satellite network next month, Musk replied. I want you to figure out how someone might hack it, either from the ground or in orbit. As they left the conference room, Ray exchanged glances with his partners. From breaking into mansions to testing satellite security, their new career path was certainly never boring. Later that day, as they sat in their favorite coffee shop, planning their approach to the satellite security challenge, Ray's phone buzzed with a news alert. He opened it to find an article about a botched robbery attempt at a wealthy tech executive's home in California. The thieves had been caught by an advanced security system and were facing years in prison. Ray showed the article to Zoe and Duke. Sound familiar? Could have been us, Duke nodded solemnly. But it wasn't, Zoe pointed out. We got lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Ray put his phone away and picked up his coffee. I'd say lucky. Definitely lucky. As they returned to their work, Ray couldn't help but appreciate the irony of their situation. They had broken into Elon Musk's mansion expecting to find valuable items to steal, only to end up with something far more valuable: a second chance. The night they had instantly regretted had ultimately become the night that changed their lives for the better. Sometimes, he reflected, the worst mistake could turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you, if you were willing to learn from it and change course. Just like the AI security system they now helped to perfect, they too had adapted and evolved, finding a new purpose that used their unique skills for good. And that, Ray decided, was a far greater prize than anything they could have stolen.